What's up, guys? Spencer here, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a track walk, starting off with basically turn one after the wall ride. This 180 is a bit tricky, especially this morning because they had to do some repatching. They did like a double layer of carpet. So with the carpet, it does come with some compromises with some tearing and stuff. So as we'll do the rest of the track walk, we'll kind of talk about that. So this 180 is pretty tricky because it kind of the first approach is a ski jump. This ski jump is not quite as sharp edge at the top. It's more rounded, so you don't get that much, or you do get a little bit more lift on this particular ski jump, which we like to kind of jump a little bit further to kind of keep the momentum kind of going. So we jump to probably here in this corner. The next kind of coming up approach is the next ski jump, which this one is really tricky. As you probably guys have seen through the live stream, there's been cars landing and flying onto the straightaway. This one has a much sharper of approach, more of a triangle. So the car doesn't get much lift, but you're also jumping to a corner. So you're kind of turning up the face of the jump. The wheels are turned and you're accelerating, which pops and loads the suspension. And with carpet, you can't really land sideways because of the spiky tires and carpet. It'll just kink and traction roll, and then with the shock tower guards and the wings, the cars just slide until they just hit a wall or a pipe. So this one's really tricky. The goal is to try to have decent speed, land a little bit on throttle, straight, and stay super tight around this pipe. And then as you're kind of approaching this double tabletop, you want to start bleeding out a little bit wide. With some of the carpet here, it kind of picks up a little bit, which we probably should talk to race control because that's not good. But what I like doing is I like going tight, bleeding out wide, hitting this outside face right here, not so far in, because the landing, there's a kink, which we'll show you. The ideal method is to kind of land past this white line that they have here, which is where the tape used to be, and then kind of landing not so abruptly on the throttle, but what this does, it allows the car to not be unsettled when you land. As you'll see in the videos, when you're landing, sometimes the cars bounce up. Sometimes that's a cause of being too aggressive on the throttle when you're landing of the jumps. Because there is some forgiveness with the boards and the subfloor, you kind of get a little bit of compressed rebound. Along with that, because the cars are running so low on carpet, the ride height, the chassis just hits super fast. So it's really critical to not overshoot this to get the car to bounce so you don't traction roll hitting this outside pipe or even going on to the next lane, which I have done. I did that in the round two of four-wheel drive qualifier. This is the part where I was mentioning with bleeding wide on this tabletop is you don't want to land super tight here because of this kink. You kind of want to land here in the middle, and then use your acceleration to kind of start powering through this next short chute on power turning section. And this is kind of one of the key elements of what starts to kind of separates the invisible speed from the people that are going to the next level speed versus just normal speed for most people, is kind of getting the breaking point, letting off probably around this section right here, utilizing the electronics, drag brake, freewheeling to allow the car to decelerate, and pulsating on the brakes so you can kind of hit this apex nice and smooth. Coming out of here, you want to accelerate. I accelerate pretty hard to get the car to go straight, and what I do is I try to stay pretty tight to this pipe, but with there being tape here and the transition, it really is sometimes can get you kind of sketchy. I just try to take the shortest line possible. I don't want to waste energy or speed going out here. I want to be here so the car physically actually goes around the track the least amount of feet possible. So shortest line. I accelerate these ski jumps. I jump it far. I basically use the momentum stopping force from the car hitting this face to basically slow down the car. It sometimes can be tricky, but with having the aggression sometimes can help with these kind of circumstances. Sometimes if you don't overjump it, your cars actually will just carry too much speed and you have to actually physically use the brake. For me, it's a little bit less brain power to jump it far, let off the gas, let the abrupt stopping of the jump slow the car down enough, let the car settle here, it'll just skip over, it'll land here, and then again, using the apex, you want to kind of start turning early. You want probably your inside rear tire to be on this painted or this taped cone here. Kind of going in this next section, which this section is super critical. One of the things that is super important about this section is not overdoing it. Going into this section, we kind of don't want to over accelerate it here, because if you get too much air, you have no braking power. So it's super important to not get the front and rear tires up with some air. So that way you can stay tight here and do the 180, start cutting back. So that's what I like to do. What do you like to do?
Sometimes I like to just take the jump.
You just like to take the jump. All right, there's a couple ways to skin a cat there. So moving on past this section, doing the 180, staying tight. If for modified, we have so much power that we kind of jolt as far as we can to this section. I don't want to downside this. You want to just accelerate, punch, and try to jump to the next section as soon as you can, and then using this section to kind of carry momentum and speed. This is probably one of the sections on this track, as you can see, we've done the track walk, where it's the most white, this is the most worn out part of the track that's been here probably the longest. So the traction here is a little bit different than the other sections. One fluid motion here, go wide. You want to start apexing, start turning. I start turning probably as soon as this line, and then kind of staying super tight here. I've hit this pipe a couple times. It just kind of bounced off. It's something that I have to kind of watch out for. And then bleeding out wide here, which it's kind of connecting the dots. You want to be kind of middle wide here so that when you land this tabletop, you can kind of use the throttle to bleed out and start turning into this section. So I probably land right down here to hit this pocket. Hitting this pocket allows me to start accelerating here to this next section to carry speed. This is probably when I'm letting off the gas and then re-accelerating to load the suspension on this ski tabletop part. We won't walk on the wood jumps here, but probably landing right here is something that I like to do. No one's really jumping this section at all. I don't think you really can, but I'm landing the rear tires here and then again accelerating off, purposely accelerating off, jumping here. And then this is kind of when you want to start to think about turning, accelerating here, decelerating, and then accelerating up the wall, and then decelerating up, and then accelerating down. Ideally, you want to stay tight here. Sometimes you kind of want to turn early, get a little excited just to finish that lap, so you can hear that lap time from Lance calling the races. The loop is right here. So accelerating down here. For me, what I found that's been the best transition for this wall ride, this is one of the more aggressive wall rides that we've seen as far as utilizing the wall rides for a long period of time. I don't think I've ever been to a track up until coming here for the first time last year where the wall ride is 30, 40 feet long. So it's important. There's a couple different important lines here. You don't want to come out super wide because this is kind of a little bit more steeped here. You want to use this inside line to accelerate up. And with some of the imperfections of the wood, the making of it, the human error, it's so hard to make this perfectly smooth. You can see that there's like the beams underneath kind of supporting it. So when you're going through, it kind of sometimes has a hopping effect going through here. So if you stay low, it's a little bit better. because of how the wood's naturally warping. And staying low, and then once you get to this point, you can start accelerating off. But you have to be a little bit careful because this is when you go from the transition to flat, the subfloor. So this is something where, again, like I mentioned earlier, where if you accelerate too hard off the transition, the car will hop, get all sideways, and you lose time there. So accelerate out of here, and then you're back to the 180 where we first started. And that's pretty much the Spencer Rivkin track walk.